For decades, Maury Povich stood at the center of family truth and DNA revelations. Calm voice, one envelope, and a sentence that could change lives forever. But some stories never made it to that famous stage. Some truths were too heavy even for the brightest studio lights. This is one of those stories. I watched my wife kiss my brother through a crack in the bedroom door. His hands were on her waist. Her fingers were in his hair. They were standing in my guest room, in my house, under my roof. And they had no idea I was home early. I stood there for 11 seconds. 11 seconds of watching my entire world collapse. And then I walked away without making a sound. But here's the part that destroyed me. My son was sleeping in the next room. My son, who was 3 years old. My son, who had my brother's eyes. My son, who I had raised since birth, believing he was mine. And now I needed to know the truth. My name is Darius. I'm 33 years old. I've been married to my wife, Keisha, for 5 years. And my brother, Malcolm, has been my best friend since the day he was born. 2 years after me, always in my shadow, always looking up to me. At least that's what I thought. Turns out Malcolm wasn't looking up to me. He was looking at my wife. Let me take you back to that day. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was supposed to be at work until 6, but my boss let us out early. Some kind of maintenance issue with the building. I texted Keisha that I was coming home. She didn't respond. That should have been my first warning. Keisha always responded. Within minutes, she was glued to her phone like it was an extension of her hand, but that day, nothing. I drove home thinking maybe her phone died. Maybe she was napping. Maybe she was busy with Jaden, our 3-year-old son. I pulled into the driveway and saw Malcolm's car parked on the street. That wasn't unusual. Malcolm came over all the time. He was Jaden's favorite uncle. He helped Keisha with things around the house when I was working late. He was family. I didn't think anything of it. I should have. The house was quiet when I walked in. Too quiet. Jaden usually ran to the door when he heard my keys. But today, nothing. Just silence. I walked through the living room, the kitchen. Everything was normal. Clean, undisturbed. And then I heard voices coming from upstairs, low, hushed, the kind of voices people use when they don't want to be overheard. My stomach dropped. I climbed those stairs like a man walking to his own execution. Each step felt heavier than the last. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it through the walls. The voices were coming from the guest room at the end of the hall. The door was cracked open, just an inch, just enough to see inside. I pressed my eye to the crack, and I saw them. Malcolm had his hands on my wife's waist. Keisha's arms were wrapped around his neck. They were kissing. Not a friendly kiss, not a family kiss, but the kind of kiss that belongs behind closed doors, between people who have done this many times before. 11 seconds. That's how long I watched before I pulled away. 11 seconds of seeing my brother's tongue in my wife's mouth. 11 seconds of realizing that everything I believed about my life was a lie. I didn't confront them. I know that sounds crazy. I know most men would have kicked down that door and started swinging. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to drag Malcolm into the street and beat him until he couldn't stand. But a bigger part of me was thinking about Jaden, my son, who had Malcolm's eyes, who had Malcolm's nose, who had Malcolm's exact smile, that crooked grin that tilted higher on the left side. I had noticed the resemblance before. Everyone had. He looks just like his uncle, my mother would say. Must be the family genes. Family genes. Or something else. I walked back downstairs without making a sound. I got in my car. I drove to a parking lot 3 blocks away, and I sat there for 2 hours trying to figure out what to do next. If I confronted them now, they would deny everything. They would say I misunderstood. They would claim it was a one-time thing, a moment of weakness, a mistake that would never happen again. But I needed more than excuses. I needed proof. I needed to know if Jaden was really mine. That night, I acted like nothing was wrong. I came home at my usual time. I hugged Keisha. I played with Jaden. I ate dinner with my family like I hadn't seen my brother kissing my wife just hours earlier. Malcolm was gone by then. Of course he was. He had probably slipped out the back door the moment he heard my car pull up. Keisha was acting normal, cheerful, asking about my day, telling me about Jaden's latest adventures. She had no idea I knew, and I wanted to keep it that way. Until I had the DNA results in my hand. I ordered the test online the next day. A home paternity kit, discreet packaging, Results in 3 to 5 business days. I waited until Keisha was at work and Jaden was napping. Then I swabbed my cheek. I swabbed Jaden's cheek while he slept, telling myself I was just being paranoid, telling myself the test would prove he was mine and I could forget any of this ever happened. I mailed the samples and then I waited. Those 5 days were the longest of my life. Every time Keisha touched me, I flinched. Every time she said, "I love you," I wondered if it was a lie. Every time Jaden called me daddy, I felt my heart crack a little more. I watched them constantly, looking for signs, looking for proof that I was wrong, that Malcolm and Keisha had only kissed that one time, that it didn't mean anything. But I couldn't unsee what I saw, and I couldn't stop looking at my son and seeing my brother's face. The results arrived on a Tuesday morning. Keisha was at work, Jaden was at daycare, I was alone in the house. The same house where I had watched my marriage fall apart through a crack in a bedroom door. I held the envelope in my hands for 15 minutes before I opened it. 15 minutes of staring at my name on the front. 15 minutes of knowing that whatever was inside would change everything. I finally tore it open. I unfolded the paper. I read the results. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0%. Jaden was not my biological son. 3 years. 3 years of midnight feedings. 3 years of first steps and first words. 3 years of believing this child was my legacy, my blood, my reason for living. And he wasn't mine. He was Malcolm's. The rage hit me like a wave. I threw the paper across the room. I punched the wall so hard I broke 2 knuckles. I screamed until my voice gave out. 3 years. My brother had been sleeping with my wife for at least 3 years, probably longer, probably since before we were even married. And they had let me raise his child. They had watched me change diapers and sing lullabies and fall in love with a baby who shared my brother's DNA, not mine. They had made me a fool in my own home. I confronted them that night, both of them, together, in the same room. I called Malcolm first, told him to come over immediately. Family emergency, I said. My voice was ice cold, but he didn't notice. He never noticed anything except what he wanted. Then I told Keisha we needed to talk, something important. She looked nervous. Maybe she sensed something was wrong. Maybe her guilty conscience was finally catching up with her. I put Jaden to bed early, read him his favorite story, kissed his forehead, told him I loved him, because despite everything, despite the DNA results burning a hole in my pocket, I still love that little boy. He might not be my blood, but he was still my son, at least for one more night. They arrived within minutes of each other. Malcolm walked in first, acting casual, acting like he hadn't been sleeping with my wife for 4 years. He even had the audacity to hug me, to call me bro, to ask if everything was okay. I wanted to break his jaw right there, but I waited. Keisha came into the living room next, wiping her hands on a dish towel, that familiar smile on her face, the smile I used to love, the smile I now knew was hiding years of lies. I sat them down, Malcolm on the couch, Keisha in the armchair. I stood in the middle of the room, towering over them, holding all the power for the first time in 4 years. Then I reached into my pocket, I pulled out the DNA results, and I threw them on the coffee table like a grenade. Someone want to explain why my son has 0% of my DNA? The silence was deafening. Keisha's face drained of color. Her hands started shaking. The dish towel fell to the floor, but she didn't move to pick it up. Malcolm's mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in his life, my smooth-talking little brother had nothing to say. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Cat got your tongue? Or were you too busy putting it in my wife's mouth to think of an excuse?" Keisha let out a sob. "Darius, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how you've been sleeping with my brother since before we got married. Explain how you got pregnant with his baby and let me raise it as my own. Explain how you looked me in the eyes every single day for 3 years and pretended everything was fine." I was shouting now. I couldn't help it. 3 years of love, 3 years of trust, 3 years of being made a fool. It all came pouring out. I saw you. I saw you kissing him in the guest room. I saw his hands on you. I know everything. Malcolm finally spoke. "Darius, bro, please listen to me." I turned on him so fast he flinched backward. "Don't you ever call me that again. You are not my brother. A brother doesn't sleep with your wife. A brother doesn't father your child. A brother doesn't watch you raise his son for 3 years and say nothing." Malcolm's eyes were wet, tears starting to form. But I didn't care. He didn't get to cry. He didn't get to be the victim here. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for any of this to happen." You never meant for it to happen? You slept with my wife for 4 years. That's not an accident. That's a choice. That's 1,000 choices every single day to betray me. I pointed at Jaden's bedroom door. And that little boy in there, he calls me daddy. He thinks I'm his father. And now I have to figure out how to tell him that everything he knows is a lie. Because of you. Because of both of you. The truth came out in ugly pieces. They had been together for 4 years. 4 years, since before Keisha and I were even married. They had started as a fling, just physical, they claimed. But it had turned into something more. When Keisha got pregnant, she knew there was a chance the baby was Malcolm's, but she convinced herself it was mine. She wanted it to be mine. And when Jaden was born, she buried the doubt and pretended everything was fine. Malcolm knew too. He had suspected from the beginning, but he never said anything because he didn't want to destroy the family. Destroy the family, like they hadn't already done that. I filed for divorce the next day. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my car in the driveway until sunrise, watching the house where my family used to live, the house where my wife and brother had been betraying me for years, the house where I had raised a child who wasn't mine. At 8 a.m., I drove straight to a lawyer's office. I told him everything, the affair, the DNA test, the 4 years of lies. I moved out that afternoon, packed one suitcase, took nothing that reminded me of her, of them, of the life I thought I had. But Jaden was the hardest part. He wasn't my biological son. The DNA proved that. But for 3 years, he had been my everything. I had rocked him to sleep. I had kissed his scraped knees. I had taught him to say daddy, a word he used every single day, a word that still echoed in my head every time I closed my eyes. How do you walk away from that? How do you look at a child you've raised since birth and say, sorry, kid, but you're not mine? I couldn't do it, even knowing the truth, even knowing Malcolm was his biological father. I couldn't abandon Jaden, so I made a decision. I would stay in his life, not as his legal father. That role would eventually go to Malcolm, whether I liked it or not, but as someone who loved him, someone who had been there from the beginning, someone who refused to punish a child for his parents' sins. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Keisha got the house, Malcolm got his son, and I got an apartment across town and a hole in my chest that I'm not sure will ever heal. But I also got something else. Clarity. I know exactly who my brother is now. I know exactly who my ex-wife is. And I know that I'm better off without either of them in my life. Jaden is 5 years old now. He calls Malcolm Daddy, and he calls me Uncle D. It's not what I imagined. It's not what I wanted, but it's something. I see him twice a month. We go to the park. We get ice cream. He tells me about school and his friends and the dog Malcolm bought him for his birthday. He doesn't know the full story. He doesn't know that I used to be his father, or that his parents' relationship destroyed my life. Someday, when he's older, someone will have to explain it to him. But not today. Today, he's just a kid who wants to play on the swings. And I'm just a man trying to figure out how to love someone who was never really mine. I haven't spoken to Malcolm in 2 years. I don't plan to start anytime soon. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some wounds never fully close. But I've stopped being angry. Anger takes too much energy. It eats you alive from the inside. And I've spent enough of my life being consumed by what Malcolm and Keisha did to me. Now I'm focused on moving forward, finding someone new, building a real family, creating a life that doesn't have lies at its foundation. For decades, Maury Povich stood at the center of family truth and DNA revelations. Calm voice, one envelope, and a sentence that could change lives forever. You are not the father. 4 words that ended my marriage. 4 words that exposed my brother. 4 words that took my son away, but also 4 words that set me free.